Imagine suffering a plane crash above the ocean with only you and one other passenger surviving.
Starting off with a lifeboat situation, huh? Not a good start.
Turns out while you were unconscious, he went around and collected every single coconut on the island for himself. Coconuts that you would also need if you don't want to starve. Of course you could go and try your luck catching some fish along the shore, but according to statistics, 9 out of 10 starved fishermen end up dying of hunger in the end.
And how many people survive eating only coconuts? And where do these statistics come from anyway? Are there statisticians on this uncharted desert isle?
The coconuts are your only realistic chance at survival.
Really? So there's no other food? There are no crabs, there are no mangoes or kiwis or berries, there wouldn't be seaweed everywhere? Listen, idiot, if your only 2 food choices are fish and coconuts, you're going to die of malnutrition. You need more of a diet than that. So even in your contrived scenario, it doesn't work.
So you ask him, can you give me some coconuts, please? And he says, sure, I can give you some coconuts, if you suck my dick.
Or you go and find the island's only source of fresh water and lay claim to that. Did you forget that you need water more than you need food? So there you are, demanding sexual favors in exchange for coconuts, while I have the only water you can drink? I can last weeks without food. You can only last a few days without water. I can wait you out.
You are faced with a conundrum. Do you suck the coconut man's dick?
No, I secret an abalone shell from the beach in my palm, and when I make to suck his dick, I cut it off instead. Then I let him bleed to death, and I have all the coconuts to myself. Do I have to think of everything here?
Anarcho-capitalism is a system without a government, or at least a centralized institution able to effect coercion on you. Everything is left up to the free market and the people's self-organization. And I'm here to make the case that within a short amount of time, both systems would devolve into a horrifying authoritarian dictatorship.
Oh yeah? We've already seen how little you're able to think about even the most obvious alternatives. In a scenario you cooked up, yeah, I know, he didn't really cook it up. The coconut scenario's been around for decades, but still, he's the one that proffered it here. People like Adam Something come up with some gotcha that they think debunks anarcho-capitalism, don't even spend 2 seconds thinking about it, and then smugly spew it out as if there's no possible refutation for it.
Is your workplace democratic? And by that I mean, do you as an employee have a say in how your workplace is run? Well, not really, right?
But it's still a system of voluntary interactions, not a state, and not a dictatorship.
And for me, this is like a little chiefdom, if you will. It's a small community, you got the chief running things, and everyone can just go and petition the chief personally if they want to. But see, the outcome of the request is still determined completely by the chieftain.
But if they don't like what this so-called chieftain is doing, they can go work somewhere else or start their own business. Government doesn't give you that option. And before you start spewing off that, if you don't like it, you can leave crapioca, which, spoiler alert, he does later, changing your job doesn't require you to pack up and move and leave behind your friends and family and your support network and everything else. But if you want to leave a state, you have to do all of that. And give up your job, too. So where's the validity in this social contract if it requires you to do the very thing you're going to claim as oppressive? Quit your job. By the way, yes, I'm cutting out minutes at a time here, because all he does in them is labor the point, which is another way you know he's just another supercilious narcissist, in love with the sound of his own voice, doesn't even think about what he's saying.
Big business takes the concept of chiefdom and upgrades it to a totalitarian dictatorship.
Told ya! You thought I was strawmanning him, didn't ya? Nope! That's exactly what he was doing!
As Bob Black wrote in his essay The Abolition of Work, work makes a mockery of freedom.
And as Fred Flintstone said, yabba dabba do! Makes just as much sense.
The official line is that we all have rights and live in a democracy. Other unfortunates who aren't free like we are forced to live in police states. These victims obey orders or else, no matter how arbitrary. The authorities keep them under regular surveillance. State bureaucrats control even the smaller details of everyday life. The officials who push them around are answerable only to higher-ups, public or private. Either way, dissent and disobedience are punished. Informers report regularly to the authorities. All this is supposed to be a very bad thing. And so it is. Although it is nothing but a description of the modern workplace.
This guy cannot have ever worked an actual job in his life.
A great example of this is when major corporations try to prevent workers' unions from forming, also known as union busting. A practice that is illegal, mind you, but they still do it anyway.
Every single word of this is wrong. It's only illegal in some states, states where workers are required to join a union. There is no union busting because there can't be. Union busting actually referred to government using the National Guard or whatever to break up unions in the 19th century. Again, shows how little he knows. In right-to-work states, however, it's the workers who don't want to join the union, because when they're given a choice, they don't like the deal. So then liars like you try to say that somehow the corporation prevented the workers from unionizing. Prominent examples are when unions tried to get into Boeing and BMW manufacturing facilities in South Carolina. Employees voted against unionizing, just like they did with Volkswagen in Tennessee and so many other places. So the liars came out and claimed it was the corporations that stopped them, and went whining to the government to force a unionization at the plants, when the workers didn't want to. How can you claim to be on the side of workers when you want to use force to go against their will? Unions have gone even further, too. I have a video on my website detailing what happened when Food Lion employees rejected a union back in the 1990s. They went whining to ABC, who sent in reporters undercover to make a fraudulent news report full of bogus claims about horrible things the company was supposedly making its workers do, including, for one example, bleaching expired meat with Clorox. None of it was true, and the only employees doing any of the horrible things they alleged were the undercover ABC reporters themselves. Management had actually told them not to do these things, and other employees refused to go along with them. That is the kind of desperation that unions will resort to, and unthinking morons like you fall for it.
For example, have you heard about this company called Tesla and its owner, Elon Musk? And to quote from a Vox article titled "Elon Musk Broke US Labor Laws on Twitter," Tesla tried many different tactics to stop workers from forming a labor union. Tesla workers distributing pro-union leaflets in the parking lot in their time off were harassed by 3 security guards.
Lie, 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 lie. These were not Tesla workers. They were union staffers who were trespassing on private property. Musk has repeatedly pointed out that he has no ability to stop workers from forming a union. But every time the Tesla workers have been asked, they don't want to. So they spread these lies for useful idiots like you to repeat. Maybe you'd like to explain why the UAW can't even get auto workers to attend a free barbecue. In fact, every claim you make is specious at best and comes from a single employee who was a union plant and very likely had contacts in the NLRB as well, since they forced Tesla to hire him back.
Illegally, Elon Musk tweeted out the following: "Nothing stopping Tesla team at our car plant from voting union. Could do so tomorrow if they wanted, but why pay union dues and give up your stock options for nothing? Our safety record is 2 times better than when the plant was UAW and everybody already gets healthcare."
And did you not even stop to ask yourself why that statement should be illegal? Nothing in it is untrue, and there is this little thing called the First Amendment. But, not for the first time in history, corrupt unions bribe corrupt judges to get the results they want. Let me ask you this. If you hate big corporations so much, why do you love unions? They're the biggest corporations in the country. By every single metric, whether it's pay, working hours, safety, or whatever, Tesla comes out way ahead of the average among unionized auto plants. Why didn't you mention that?
Proponents of free market capitalism usually bring up the fact that the workers can just switch workplaces or, just move to another city. This is the freedom that workers have. But is it though? Changing your workplace is not an easy thing to do. I know because I've done it before. It's long, time-consuming, financially difficult. Chances are you'll be without a salary for at least a month.
Look, moron, I've changed jobs many times. Hell, I've changed industries. It's not that difficult. Maybe you're just stupid.
Also, what if there's nothing for you to do in your area? What if you live in some small town in some flyover state with like one Walmart and 2 other workplaces?
Well, it sounds like the place is ripe for another business. Why don't you start one?
Trust me, there's a lot of things corporations would do under a free market system, like violating your privacy online or offline, or selling off your sensitive information for money.
Yeah, wouldn't it be horrible if they started doing that? Oh, wait a minute. Why is it that every single time you morons try and fearmonger about what would happen under a free market, it's something that's already happening under statism? And how easily would this situation have come around without all these bogus regulations stopping competition, preventing things like competing phone companies, and making it so expensive to operate that startups don't have much of a chance?
Speaking of which, today's video is sponsored by Atlas VPN.
Right, so first of all, hypocrite much? It's hilarious that you chose Atlas VPN right after complaining about the very system that allows for spying to begin with. Atlas is located in the US, and if it's in any of the Five Eyes countries, then government can issue secret warrants and demand that they turn over any of their information they have about you, and a VPN provider knows as much about you as your ISP does. And in case you're thinking that you can avoid that by paying in cryptocurrency, Atlas VPN doesn't take crypto. Not only that, but the NSA actively monitors the traffic, and they have to use, for example, DNS servers that censor content at the behest of the US and its partners. They can even secretly add malware to user devices and cut off users on their order. They can even poison TLS lookups and destroy HTTPS security. That's why in 2014, Reporters Without Borders listed the US as an internet enemy. If you're gonna use a VPN provider, definitely use one outside of the Five Eyes, and you'd best avoid any in the 14 Eyes for that matter. So again, this is how little Adam Something knows about what he's talking about. Sorry folks, but I wouldn't have bothered dumping on Atlas VPN if he hadn't just gotten through fear-mongering that a free market would invade your privacy.
Atlas VPN also comes bundled with a nifty breach scanner feature. Open the menu inside the app, enter an email address, and the app will show you whether there have been any leaks associated with that email address.
Yeah, but Have I Been Pwned is free. Just saying.
According to proponents of free market capitalism, if you are out of options, your main recourse is just to move to a different city.
No one says that, because in a free market you wouldn't need to. You'd move to a different city to get away from what the government is doing. Technically, in a totally free market and anarcho-capitalist society, you wouldn't have cities because you wouldn't have governments. So, nice straw man. Ironically, as I pointed out before, that is what statists claim as the justification for their system. If you don't like it, you can just leave. So it's also confession through projection.
The non-aggression principle. This means that technically you would be able to live a life of absolute freedom. Well, until the Amazon Gestapo shows up and tells you that you are now under the rule of holy Jeff Bezos I, and anyone opposing him will be decapitated in an Amazon warehouse, and their body parts will be sent to their family members as a warning in boxes with same-day Amazon Prime delivery.
How do you think that is in any way compliant with any principle of non-aggression? At any rate, it won't work, because in an ANCAP society, people would have guns. There's a reason why the Gestapo disarmed everyone who wasn't in the Nazi Party before they did anything else. But really, they wouldn't even get to that point. Because, and yes, this is Pratt, so sorry those of you who've sat through this spiel before, but statist twits just won't learn. It'll cost money to get all those guns. While they're spending money arming up, they're having to pass the costs along to the consumer to pay for them. Which means that a competitor is going to have a serious advantage in price competition, and Amazon will either have to knock it off or be drummed out of business. And even if they aren't, the more guns they buy, the more they increase the demand for guns, which means the price of guns goes up, which compounds the problem. And it's a huge signal to people that something's going on. Someone is arming up. Not to mention that the gun manufacturers would notice all these orders coming in from Amazon all of a sudden. Any conspiracy that requires more than a dozen people or so to stay quiet is doomed to failure, so they wouldn't even be able to shut them up with bribes. And even then, how are they going to recruit all those Gestapo members without anyone finding out? How are they going to train them? And where? Once again, the statist boob just has them showing up out of nowhere with zero thought put behind how they could possibly get themselves into that position to begin with. They just become a big corporation because reasons and would have a ton of money because more reasons, which would enable them to have a Gestapo because even more reasons.
So I believe by now all of us can start seeing the problem, the fatal flaw at the core of free market capitalism.
We see the fatal flaw at the core of your brain.
Traditional corporations are set up like dictatorships.
By the way, I just want to remind everyone that corporations are a creation of government and they wouldn't exist in a free market. And by the way, notice who is missing in his unthinking diatribe? The consumer. They are the rulers in this participatory democracy. Without them, Amazon doesn't have sales, workers don't get paid, nothing. But statists like Adam Something thrive on dividing people by class. Worker versus business owner, minorities versus whites, women versus men, whatever. But free market capitalism doesn't do that, because there, the consumer is king. And everyone is a consumer. Everyone's gotta eat.
The owner has absolute control.
Spoken like someone who's never owned a business in his life.
And the subordinates can only hold the owner accountable through a government, which in the first world is a parallel, democratic, more powerful power structure, and so it can hold the corporate autocratic power structures accountable.
Wrong way around. It's the corporations that need the government to protect them from competition and let them hold power in the market.
But I do think there is a solution actually, namely workplace democracy.
I've already debunked this crap. See my recent video about Richard Wolff.
So if your goal is the lack of coercion, then free market capitalism or anarcho-capitalism should be the last things you would want. And I'm confident in making this statement because coercion already exists in the current system.
So you're confident that coercion would exist in a free market because it already exists with government, and therefore it would be bad to have a free market because you'd end up with the coercion you have with government? Yeah, statism is a religion, because you have to have religion to be made that stupid. So thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe, leave a comment, and go to donate.bogosity.tv to keep me doing what I do. And check out all the great content here, like this video selected just for you.